Okay, in this video, we're going to give you guys just a little bit of a bonus.
Yep.
Doing something above and beyond that was not originally planned for VTM number 1, if you will, or the introduction to OpenGL. What we're going to do is set up our application to support multiple texture modes.
Right. So basically, if I just open this up real quick, this is what we had, and basically it's multiplying everything together. So our smoke is still really bright.
Yeah.
And what we would prefer to have for our smoke is darken everything up. So we're going to add a mode to allow us to darken whatever is behind us.
That's right. And to do this, we're going to need to get an OpenGL extension.
Right. So what I'm going to do is go over to our website here, and you can find this really easily under the OpenGL extension registry if you search in Google. And what we need here is our GL extensions.header file, and this is a very large header file. It's like 360K of various definitions that allow us to take more advantage of OpenGL utilizing extensions. And extensions are basically a series of things that have been added over the course of OpenGL's life. OpenGL has been around for a really long time, and extensions basically give us more features.
That's right.
So let's go ahead and save this into our, if I just save this here, Microsoft Visual Studio VC Platform SDK include GL, and save that into here. As you can see, 326K, very large file. And just to kind of reiterate here, that was under Visual C7, Platform SDK include, and under GL, we're now storing our GL extensions.h. So if I go back into our STL demo, the first thing I need to do is go into our GL engine.h and include this GLEXT .h. And now there's two things we're going to need to do. The first thing is extend our texture class so that we can support multiple modes. So that basically when we load it in, we save as an extra variable inside of our class what kind of mode we want to use. Normal, as we've been using, or do we want to darken? And if you want to go in and add extra modes, that's perfectly cool as well. So let's go open up our texture.h, and at the very top here, what we're going to do is add an enumeration. So right above our struct, add an enum texture modes, and just semicolon this off. So this is going to be a mode normal. We'll start out at 0, and then mode darken. We're just going to show two modes here, normal mode and darken mode. And then, very simple, simply go down here in our public. We need to get the mode at some point so that when we're drawing our emitter, we know which mode to use. So get mode is going to return our mode, and then under private variables, we actually create that. In our private section, we're going to store our mode, so simply store our mode. And then finally, in our constructor, we're actually going to pass our mode. So we're going to simply pass the mode for our texture, and we'll default this to mode normal. So we'll pass mode normal. And then if we go into our texture CPP, let's copy our get mode just so we can do it quickly. So right in here we have our int in mode. And then down here, we'll simply set our mode equal to in mode. And this is just used to store per texture what kind of mode we're using. And so if I go down here and implement my get mode, let me just set return our mode. And now once we have that set up, what we can do is go into our emitter class. And if we go down to our update here, you'll notice this is where we bind our texture, enable our textures, and it's right here that we're going to set what kind of blending mode we're going to use. So if I just go down here, the first thing I need to do is set the basically start utilizing the extension, if you will, and that's going to combine multiple operations. And I can do this with a call to glText envi, and simply pass it texture env. So I'm setting the texture environment mode. So GL texture thank you, environment mode, and I'm setting it to GL combine ext. Hence the extension. And if you don't include glext.h, this will flag as something I don't understand.
Right.
So at this point, we can actually check if the texture, remember, texture is one of our own local variables that specifies what texture the emitter is using. If its get mode is equal to mode darken, we handle it. Otherwise, we're going to handle if it's a regular texture. So if get mode equals mode normal, do so and so. And again, you can extend this to all sorts of different extra modes if you wanted to. And this is really simple. Basically, in our darken, what we're going to do is call our glBlendFunc and pass it GL0. So remember, this is our source factor and destination factor. So what this essentially will allow us to do is darken it considerably. But when we use this one mode here, unfortunately, we're going to end up not really, well, how do I want to put this? Basically, it's not going to take into account alpha very much. I'll show you an example real quick here. So let me change this over to, this is our normal function, blend function, is GL source, alpha, and GL1, as we saw before. So let me go ahead and compile this out real quick, and I'll show you what this looks like and why we need to kind of extend this a little bit. Okay, if I go back into my texture.cpp here, let me make sure I go into my texture.h. I think I spelled it wrong here. Int mode, the class one unresolved external symbol. I'll go ahead and rebuild this and make sure that it's not doing anything totally insane here. So just give it a second. Yeah, and it was just a weird rebuild error. So I just rebuilt it and all is now good. So let me go back into our STL demo. And with one of the textures that we're loading here for the smoke, all the other ones can simply be mode normal. But in this one, we're going to make this mode darken. If I compile this and run it, you'll see what we get here. These are all the normal kind of thing that we got before. Our flare is like so, flame is like so. And then our darken just kind of,
whoa.
Well, that kind of darkens more than I was expecting. So what I'm going to need to do, let me just make sure everything is, okay, that's a little bit more dark than I wanted it to be. Actually, let me go back real quick and make sure that when I switch back, okay. So when I set it to that mode, it just kind of blows everything out of proportion because I'm not setting it back. So what I need to do, I just kind of want to show you exactly what this is doing here. So let me go back to my emitter, excuse me. And after we're done calling this, let's set it back to our GL source alpha, GL1. So once we pass this, we're actually not going to get anything. And what we wanted to do is kind of, well, darken it. And since we're not getting that, well, that's kind of a bad thing. So what we're going to do is come into here. And remember, we're doing our combine. So here's what we're going to do. If I come into here, we have our GL text environment call again. And we're going to pass it two things, our GL texture environment, and set our source 1 RGB. Remember, we have that whole source factor, etc. This is basically setting what our source 1. We basically have different texture units that we can modify. Texture unit 0 has already been set, and texture unit 1 here, which is source 1, is going to be of RGB type, and we're setting this to previous ext. So utilize our previous color that we've already created. And our text envi is going to be our texture env. And then our GL operand 1. What kind of operation are we going to apply to our source 1? And this is going to multiply on our source alpha. And we do something very similar for this one as well, because once we specify this, we need to set it back at some point. And for this one, simply multiply by the color. And if I just compile this real quick, source color, thank you. Wow. So our default mode should look the same, but when we go over to our smoke, okay. One other thing we need to change that I totally forgot about. If I exit out of this and go back into my SDL demo, we're kind of drawing things in an opposite order, and when we're using this multiply method, we need to switch it around. So basically, we're calling our grid after we're calling our emitter update. I'm going to switch this around. So basically, call my grid, and then call my update for my emitter. And of course, let me just bring this down here. So we've already enabled lighting. So we're going to draw our grid first, and then do our update of our emitters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but GL disable blend, GL enable blend.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Yeah, just a little bit confused. Too much typing.
Yeah, lots of typing. Hours of typing.
All right, so we get something really interesting here. Basically, I think what's going wrong here is our depth test is now being enabled. So what I'm actually wait, can't believe I keep doing this. I meant to have it enable the blending, because remember, we set our glBlendFunc. If we don't have blending, well, nothing's going to kind of blend.
Right.
So let me set that back up. All right, so we're back to where we were here. So this works, and now check it out. Our smoke is actually coming into play here. Now let me go back real quick and show you what I was trying to show you before, now that we have that figured out. So if I come back into my emitter, if I take these two text environment eyes out, here's what you're going to get. Let me just render this real quick. Notice this looks fine. This looks fine. And our smoke is darkening everything, and if I turn the saturation down, you'll notice that it is darkening, but notice how we get popping. And alpha no longer comes into play here. And basically what our extension is doing is multiplying our alpha onto that so that we get smooth blending again with darkening. So if we just comment these guys back out, and you'll notice our smoke now works. So we can, let me just do a real quick flame effect here so you can see what it looks like. Let me change this over to our flame. Let me take down my saturation. And let me kind of bring down my size a little bit. Something like so. Make his life a little bit shorter. Let me emit a few more. Alright, something like that. Looks a lot better. Turn down his alpha a little bit. Is that looking okay?
Yep.
And actually, let me increase my emission radius just a little bit as well. What I'm going to do here is add another emitter and add my smoke and kind of just move this up in Y a little bit and turn down the alpha just a little bit. Actually, move it down maybe a little bit, like something like that. And then turn up the emission radius. So it does look like we actually have smoke coming out of our fire.
Very nice.
So that's basically a very quick introduction to multi-texturing, if you will. And, of course, an in-depth discussion would go way beyond the scope of the first VTM, but we just thought we'd throw this in as a bonus.
Quick bonus, that's it. So at this point, we have completed the particle engine.
Yes, it is done.
So you guys feel free to go off and play with the different controls, add new parameters, see what you can pull off yourself.
Yeah, add different controls or anything.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, for sure. And with that, that is now going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot.